The mythology of rock history often depends upon images of unity. Musicians standing shoulder to shoulder beneath stage lights, their harmonies suggesting emotional coherence where none may exist. Few bands embodied that illusion more convincingly than Fleetwood Mac. When Christine McVie and Stevie Nicks sang together, their voices intertwined with such apparent ease that audiences assumed intimacy where, increasingly, there was estrangement. What emerged publicly as transcendence often concealed rivalry, fatigue, and the slow corrosion of trust. In the late 1970s, at the height of the band's cultural dominance, Fleetwood Mac appeared untouchable. The 1977 album Rumours sold tens of millions of copies, transforming private heartbreak into public catharsis. Yet that very alchemy, turning personal fracture into commercial triumph, intensified the emotional strain within the group. McVie, often characterized as the stabilizing force, valued restraint and melodic clarity. Nicks, by contrast, cultivated mystique, chiffon, shawls, incantatory gestures, and a voice steeped in romantic ruin. These differences were not merely aesthetic, they signaled divergent philosophies of fame. Where McVie sought equilibrium, Nicks appeared to embrace volatility as both artistic engine and identity. The stage amplified this contrast. Nicks commanded attention with ritualistic movement, her presence ethereal and commanding. McVie remained largely at her keyboard, grounded and composed. In a band already saturated with romantic entanglements, most notably Nicks' tempestuous relationship with Lindsey Buckingham, comparison became inevitable. The chemistry that fueled the songs also fueled resentment. As love curdled into antagonism, tracks like Dreams became monuments to emotional endurance, but their creation extracted a human cost. The 1980s intensified this imbalance. Nicks' solo ascent, propelled by albums such as Belladonna, elevated her into singular stardom. She became, in the public imagination, the face of Fleetwood Mac's mystique. McVie, whose songwriting had been equally essential to the band's sonic architecture, remained comparatively understated. The divergence was not merely professional, it reflected contrasting appetites for spectacle. McVie reportedly preferred domestic calm and creative privacy. Nicks gravitated toward grand narratives, romantic, spiritual, mythic. Fame hardened Nicks' persona. Collaborations with figures such as Tom Petty and producer Jimmy Iovine deepened her artistic reach but also underscored her intensity. Admirers described brilliance, detractors perceived volatility. Substance abuse compounded these tensions. Cocaine in the late 1970s and early 1980s, followed by a debilitating dependency on Klonopin, dulled her creative instincts and destabilized her emotional equilibrium. While McVie functioned as mediator within the band's recurring conflicts, she could not insulate herself indefinitely from the exhaustion of perpetual drama. The internal fractures resurfaced dramatically in 2018 with Buckingham's dismissal from Fleetwood Mac. Official explanations emphasized logistical and interpersonal conflicts, yet the event symbolized a decisive shift in power. Many observers interpreted it as confirmation of Nicks' ascendancy within the group's hierarchy. For McVie, who had returned to the band in 2014 after a lengthy retreat to the English countryside, the atmosphere reportedly felt familiar. Unresolved tensions repackaged as reunion. McVie's 1998 departure had been an act of self-preservation. After decades of touring, romantic disillusionment, and band politics, she withdrew into rural quiet, rediscovering music as solace rather than spectacle. Her 2014 return carried the aura of reconciliation. On stage, nostalgia smoothed visible seams. Harmonies soared with undiminished warmth. Yet backstage dynamics, shaped by decades of rivalry, resisted reinvention. What the audience perceived as continuity often masked emotional distance. Nicks' public image during these later years oscillated between resilience and isolation. She remained a formidable cultural figure, her concerts staged as ceremonial affirmations of endurance. Yet interviews frequently hinted at loneliness. The myth, lace, silver boots, lunar symbolism, had grown so encompassing that it threatened to eclipse the private self. Success functioned simultaneously as validation and enclosure, a crown that confined as much as it exalted. Meanwhile, McVie's legacy crystallized around steadiness. Her songwriting privileged melodic lucidity and emotional restraint. If Nicks dramatized rupture, McVie articulated acceptance. The contrast was not oppositional but complementary, two interpretive modes within the same musical ecosystem. However, complementarity does not preclude friction. Decades of comparison, magnified by media narratives eager for archetypes, inevitably strained their bond. When McVie died in 2022, tributes poured forth across the music world. Nicks' public remembrance was poetic and visibly grief-stricken. Yet the poignancy of the moment lay in its belatedness. Their relationship, once intimate and creatively symbiotic, had long been attenuated by pride, fatigue, and miscommunication. Loss imposed a clarity that coexistence had obscured. In mourning, Nicks confronted not merely the death of a bandmate but the erosion of a formative friendship. The broader arc of their story complicates simplistic moral binaries. Nicks is neither villain nor martyr, McVie neither saint nor silent sufferer. Both navigated an industry that commodified vulnerability and amplified ego. Fleetwood Mac's mythology thrives on this paradox. That chaos yielded cohesion, that fractured relationships produced songs of startling unity. The audience heard harmony, the artists endured discord. In the years following McVie's passing, Nicks continued to tour, her voice weathered yet resolute. She stands now as both custodian and remnant of an era when rock excess coexisted with melodic sophistication. Her legend shimmers precisely because it contains contradiction, brilliance entwined with insecurity, devotion shadowed by control. McVie's memory, conversely, endures as a testament to artistic modesty and compositional grace. Together, their narrative forms a cautionary elegy about ambition, friendship, and the burdens of myth. The stage that once united them also magnified their differences. The applause that celebrated their harmony often drowned out quieter fractures. And yet, the music persists, haunting, luminous, indelibly human. If Part 1 traces the visible architecture of rivalry and restraint within Fleetwood Mac, Part 2 must linger in the psychological terrain beneath it. The fragile economies of validation, authorship, and memory that shaped the uneasy sisterhood between Christine McVie and Stevie Nicks. Their tension was never reducible to jealousy alone. It was, more profoundly, about narrative control, about who would be remembered as the band's emotional axis and who would become its quiet infrastructure. From the beginning, Fleetwood Mac operated less like a traditional ensemble and more like an emotional commons in which romantic attachments doubled as creative catalysts. The collapse of Nicks' relationship with Lindsey Buckingham during the making of Rumours established a template. Private devastation repurposed as sonic triumph. Songs became coded messages. Harmonies functioned as negotiations. McVie, who was navigating her own marital dissolution from bassist John McVie, participated in this alchemy with composure. Yet composure is not immunity. Her steadiness, so often praised, may also have rendered her emotional labor invisible. Nicks, conversely, embodied romantic spectacle. She did not merely write about heartbreak, she staged it. Tracks such as Silver Springs and Dreams framed longing as operatic endurance. This dramaturgy captivated audiences but complicated internal dynamics. The band's mythology increasingly centered on Nicks as priestess of feeling, Buckingham as tortured counterpart, and the ensemble as supporting chorus. McVie's contributions, structurally vital, melodically elegant, risked being subsumed beneath the drama. The asymmetry widened as Nicks' solo career expanded. Belladonna did not merely confirm her independence, it reoriented the public gaze. Collaborations with Tom Petty and Don Henley positioned her within a broader constellation of rock royalty. McVie, who also pursued solo work, did so without the same mythic framing. The difference was not strictly commercial but symbolic. Nicks was narrated as enchantress, McVie as artisan. In an industry that privileges archetype over subtlety, the former commands more oxygen. Yet Nicks' ascendance carried liabilities. Addiction destabilized her equilibrium, particularly her prolonged dependency on Klonopin during the late 1980s and early 1990s. What began as medical intervention became creative paralysis. She has since described those years as a spiritual dimming, a period when her voice and sense of self felt estranged. McVie, observing from within the same orbit, reportedly experienced a different exhaustion, not chemical, but relational. The constant recalibration around Nicks' needs, moods, and mythos eroded the egalitarian premise upon which the band once functioned. The question of authority crystallized again in 2018 with Buckingham's removal. Official statements cited scheduling conflicts and interpersonal strain. Yet the event symbolized a reconfiguration of power. Many commentators interpreted it as the culmination of Nicks' long consolidation of influence within Fleetwood Mac. McVie's position in this episode was nuanced. While she had endured her own creative clashes with Buckingham, his absence altered the band's internal grammar. The triangular tension that had historically diffused authority collapsed into a more centralized structure. It is tempting to frame this consolidation as villainy. Such a reading, however, oversimplifies the gendered terrain of rock leadership. Nicks operated within a culture that historically marginalized female authority. To assert control required stamina and, at times, severity. Her protectiveness over image and narrative may reflect survival strategies as much as ego. Nonetheless, strategies that ensure endurance can also generate isolation. The fortress that shields becomes a barrier to reciprocity. McVie's intermittent withdrawals, from touring, from Los Angeles' excess, from the band itself, suggest an alternate survival strategy: retreat. Her relocation to the English countryside in 1998 signaled a refusal of perpetual spectacle. There, music resumed a private function. The piano was no longer an instrument of competition but of restoration. When she rejoined Fleetwood Mac in 2014, the reunion shimmered with nostalgia. Audiences witnessed reconciliation. Insiders perceived residual hierarchies. The 2014 to 2019 tours exemplified this duality. On stage, the harmonies remained transcendent. The visual tableau, Nicks twirling, McVie poised at the keys, reaffirmed a shared legacy. Yet reports of setlist disputes and subtle exclusions hinted at unresolved asymmetries. Creative suggestion, in a group so long defined by strong personalities, became a referendum on status. For McVie, whose temperament inclined toward consensus, the environment could feel less collaborative than ceremonial. McVie's death in 2022 introduced finality to a relationship long characterized by pauses rather than endings. Nicks' public tributes were suffused with lyric tenderness. Grief, however, often clarifies what coexistence obscures. The absence of the other reveals the architecture of dependence. For decades, McVie had functioned as harmonic counterweight to Nicks' volatility. Without that counterpoint, the myth risks imbalance. The enduring fascination with their dynamic speaks to a broader cultural hunger for narratives of female rivalry. Popular discourse frequently casts successful women as adversaries in zero-sum contests for attention. Yet the McVie-Nicks story resists such reduction. It is a study in temperamental divergence under extraordinary pressure. One artist pursued transcendence through mystique, the other pursued coherence through craft. Their friction was not incidental but structural, embedded within the band's creative engine. In retrospect, Fleetwood Mac's greatness derived from this very instability. Harmony did not arise from sameness but from negotiated difference. McVie's melodic steadiness tempered Nicks' incantatory fervor. Buckingham's precision intersected with emotional volatility. The result was music that articulated rupture without succumbing to it. Today, Nicks tours as a singular emblem of that era, simultaneously relic and living force. Her performances oscillate between invocation and remembrance. McVie's absence reverberates as silence within those harmonies, a reminder that collaboration leaves residues no solo career can fully absorb. Their shared history endures not as fairy tale nor feud, but as elegy, a testament to the costs of ambition, the fragility of friendship, and the paradox that some of rock's most luminous songs were born from shadows neither woman entirely escaped. In the end, the story of Christine McVie and Stevie Nicks resists resolution. It lingers instead as a meditation on proximity and distance, on how two artists can create seamless harmony while inhabiting profoundly different inner worlds. Within Fleetwood Mac, their voices converged with breathtaking unity. Beyond it, pride, myth, and survival pulled them apart. What remains is neither rivalry nor romance, but resonance, the echo of songs forged in tension, and a partnership that, however fractured, reshaped rock history with indelible grace.